The affirmative team presented this compelling case saying individuals should not have to pay taxes. Of course, the negative team is not going to say that taxes are a great policy and we love paying taxes. However, we will claim that repeal of this policy right now will lead to more disadvantages than advantages, and we strongly urge you to stick with the status quo. Let's start this negative speech by starting with the affirmative burdens that we believe they have to uphold before an affirmative ballot is warranted. So there are three of them. The first, investment is hindered. They have to prove to you that death tax is right now hindering investment. Therefore, lifting the tax will increase investment into our economy. The second, investment creates jobs. Even if there was investment with the affirmative team's plan, would this be a significant amount of investment to create jobs in our economy, and would we see significant economic growth? Third and finally is the criterion of health. Even if they were to create investment and some jobs, would it outweigh the disadvantages that the negative team will continue to present in our constructive speeches? Now let's move right into the justification, showing why the affirmative team is actually not going to create the advantages that they claim that they will create. Starting with justification 1, about revenue increasing. Now they brought up this evidence in their solvency, saying that repeal will increase revenue. They quoted a source by Stephen Enton. My first response is false evidence. False evidence. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities reports that, quote, the report sponsored by the American Family Business Foundation, authored by Stephen Enton, claims that repealing the estate tax would actually increase government revenue. The report fails entirely to support this claim. The report fails to describe the crucial data, models, and assumptions upon which its claims are based. Some of the report's apparent assumptions are dubious. The paper is inconsistent, and it's also highly unlikely that small business owners are as sensitive to the marginal state tax rate as Enton suggests. As you can see, with a specific piece of evidence, the evidence provided by the affirmative team is not proven by any kind of empirical data. Therefore, it should not be accepted that this plan will increase revenue. Rather, it will decrease revenue. Which brings me to my second response, common sense. Now, right now, this plan is generating billions of dollars for our government. You get rid of it. Our revenue is going to increase. This doesn't really make any sense, and this is backed up by the data that the negative team has presented thus far in this round, and we'll continue to see why these claims are true. Moving on to the second justification, talking about the economy and that this plan will actually have positive effects. Well, moving on and starting with the first, the background point, that of business devastation, that businesses are being devastated by the estate tax. My first response is very few businesses, and this is talking about that investment, or at least a significant amount of investment, is not being hampered, and relating specifically to the first burden of the affirmative. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities states that, quote, as a recent Tax Policy Center commentary indicates, the estate tax cannot have much effect on business decisions by small business owners because, quote, because hardly any owners face the estate tax. And this makes sense. The estate tax rate right now is $5 million. The actual economic definition of a small business is a business who brings in $1 million of revenue. This doesn't make sense. Small businesses are not being subject to this estate tax. And you can see this with this evidence. My second response is power tax. Power tax. Basically, the affirmative is using the word devastated to make this sound like such a significant advantage, when actually devastation is not paying 45% of what is above $5 million. Now, here's an important thing to know about the estate tax. Right now, the current rate is $5 million. You do not have to pay the tax on that $5 million. You only pay tax on what is above the $5 million. If I receive $501 million from my father, I pay taxes on $1. If I receive $6 million, I pay taxes on $1 million, which means I keep $5,550,000. Businesses are not being devastated because they get to keep at least $5 million. Any business that cannot function without $5 million is not a small business. Moving on to the second point of the affirmative team of decreased savings and investment. My first response is turn, fewer jobs. Now actually, saving does not increase employment, investment does. Joe Weisenthal in December of 2011 states that, quote, when people are saving a lot but not investing, employment dips. Want to improve unemployment? Improve the ratio of investment to savings. Therefore, the fact that they're admitting that they're going to increase savings with their plan proves that people are going to be privately saving but not investing in the economy. That's going to dip employment because a person investing into their bank account doesn't mean that your average small business is getting any extra money to expand. This is private saving. Now, in their second claim that investment will be created, I have two responses. The first is more taxes. More taxes. Now basically, as we said in the burden of the affirmative, they have to prove that companies are being burdened, that the burden will lift. But actually, if you pass their plan, individuals will and small businesses will face more taxes. As the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities states in December of 2009, quote, many more people and many more family-owned businesses and farms would face new taxes as a result of the changes in the capital gains treatment of inherited assets than would benefit from the end of the estate tax itself. Few people will benefit at all from the disappearance of the estate tax. In contrast, the heirs of approximately 71,000 new estates could face new capital gains taxes if the estate tax is allowed to disappear. Now, basically what this means is that right now in the estate tax, there's a provision called the step-up process, meaning that if you receive an inheritance, you don't have to pay a capital gains tax. So if my father buys a house that was $20 when he bought it, and now it's $200,000, I don't have to pay any capital gains tax. Now, without the estate tax, I wouldn't have to pay the estate tax, but I would have to pay a capital gains tax on $199,000. As you can see, this is actually going to put more of a tax burden on investors. Now, they actually admitted this in their 1AC. This is how they link to government revenue, saying, well, we're going to get more capital gains tax. But a capital gains tax is a tax on investment. The main point of a capital gains tax is when people sell stocks that appreciate when a company expands. So they're taxing investment and company expansion, and yet are still trying to claim advantages that our businesses and small businesses will grow. This clearly doesn't make sense, and when you look at the evidence, many more people, when we look at this net beneficially and what's best for our entire economic prosperity, you can see that more people will be burdened, not helped, by the passage of an affirmative ballot. My third response is government is saving. Since we've seen that the affirmative teens plan evidence is faulty and that the government will run a deficit, well, when the government runs a deficit, it can't just instantly cut programs. It has to borrow money and therefore decrease investment. As the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities states, quote, when the federal government runs a deficit, it pays for the shortfall by borrowing money from the private sector. This consumes a portion of private saving and thus lowers national savings. Repeal of the tax would add $798 billion to deficits over the first decade. That, in turn, would reduce the amount of domestic capital available for investment. As you can see, once again, investment will decrease with their plan. They decrease government revenue by almost $1 trillion over 10 years, so almost $100 billion per year. This $100 billion will have to be made up by borrowing from the private sector. This will decrease investment, which is the entire point of the affirmative team's case. They are hoping to increase investment, but it actually be decreased. You can clearly see they will not create their advantages. Now, under their solvency, saying that, well, this will happen because we have advocates. My one response is advocates are not solvency. Saying I have people that agree with me is not saying your plan will work, because we have people that agree with us too. And there are two sides to every single issue. We need analysis and evidence supporting claims, not simply saying, well, there are people that agree with us, therefore they're right. This is not solvency. Advocacy, sure, but it's not solvency. Moving last to the 1.5 million jobs, my one response again, false evidence. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities states, quote, two reports from the American Family Business Foundation implausibly claim that repeal would create 1.5 million jobs at literally no cost. The report gets the economics all wrong and relies on back-of-the-envelope analysis rather than empirical data. For all of these reasons, because the affirmative team cannot create investment and they have not upheld their burdens, we strongly urge you to vote for them. Thank you.
Sure. The first two had to do specifically with investment. Can you tell me why investment is the biggest issue in this round?
I believe that's basically the highway to creating jobs, that you're hoping to put more investment into companies and that allows them to expand and hire more workers.
Okay, so you believe that investment is the sole reason, supported by the affirmative team's plan, in our case, that jobs will be created?
I believe that is really the only way that jobs are created. Eventually there has to be more investment in the company. If they never get more money, they can never expand. It's impossible.
Okay, so if we can prove that jobs will be created without investment, would we still be able to win the round on that alone?
Well, I mean, if you can prove that and argue against our reputation, then sure, we'll consider those arguments.
Okay, thank you. I want to move down to your points against the justification one solvency point. You were saying that our evidence was false.
Correct.
My question over here, your source over here was the Center on Budget and Public...
the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities.
Okay, now do they publish their own studies?
Yes, I believe they do publish on this one. Yes. The evidence specifically in this was actually put in another study, the Urban Institute for Urban Institution Tax Policy Center.
Okay, so who is the Urban Institute?
They're a large tax policy, non-partisan tax policy center that does their own research.
And do they publish their own studies?
I believe they would publish their own studies.
Okay, can I see your evidence over there?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Now moving on to justification two, speaking about business devastation, your first response was very few firms have actually, or very few businesses have actually had a pay. What was your date on this evidence?
Let me check. Actually, you just said it. That was 2009.
It was 2009. Okay, so what was the exemption rate in 2009?
2009, I believe it was $1 million. I
Was
believe in 2009. I'm not exactly sure the history, but I believe it was $1 million.
All right, my partner can read that.
Sure.
Okay, now moving on to your point of savings and investment, you seem to state that investment increases jobs. So do you agree with the second affirmative burden that investment increases jobs?
Yes, I believe it's your burden to prove that if you can create investment, the investment that you create will create jobs.
Okay, so both the affirmative and the negative team agree with the second burden that investment increases jobs, right?
Well, I believe investment into what? I believe just investment into another country is not going to cost jobs. You need to prove that the investment that you stifle is, or that you encourage is going to create jobs in our economy.
Okay, understood. Moving down a bit, you're speaking about capital gains and how people have to pay capital gains. My question is, don't you have to sell something to pay the capital gains tax?
Yes, you do have to sell something, which is exactly how investment happens. You sell stocks, or you sell your house, or
okay,
everything.
so it's a choice, right?
Yes, it is a choice.
Okay, so under the current system and with the affirmative plan, people would still sell their assets or would sell their stock and thus pay the capital gains.
No, that's why this is specific to the affirmative team's plan. With the death tax, there is a step-up process that says you don't have to pay capital gains tax if you sell anything you inherited through the death tax.
Okay, thank you very